Well, some Missouri lawmakers want to ban the use of certain drones by law enforcement agencies and local governments.
The sponsor cities say they're concerned about data security, but critics are calling it an attack on market competition. WGEM's Missouri Capitol Bureau Chief Joe McLean has more.
We need to cut off our funding of these Chinese companies.
In the House Homeland Security Committee today, the room full of law enforcement and first responders from Lake St. Louis, Rolla, Cape Girardeau, and all across the state of Missouri. Blue Springs Republican Dan Stacy sponsoring a bill that would bar local governments from buying drones made in countries of concern, including China, where the widely used DJI brand drones are made.
I feel for anybody who's using drones. I think we need to be using drones. In fact, I think they're an essential tool. But the United States Department of Defense classifies DJI as a Chinese military company operating within our borders.
The chairman asked the room who's in support of the ban, and then asked who's opposing it.
Okay.
One voice speaking against the ban was that of John Yeast, who has more than 7,000 flight hours on unmanned aircraft for the St. Charles County Ambulance District, SWAT teams, search and rescue operations, and more. He also trains agencies across the country on piloting drones, and he said the Chinese ones are just better.
This bill's sole purpose and intent is to limit market competition by forcing agencies to purchase less capable and tremendously more expensive. The drones we would be forced to use under this bill have inadequate capabilities compared to those of our current drones, yet they cost 10 times more.
Yeast and others went on to say that drones can operate without connecting to the internet, that owners already are able to control where the data goes, and that the information that can be collected from a drone can just as easily be gathered from a satellite, of which the Chinese have many.
If the state of Missouri legislation body were to pass this bill, nearly 90% of all public safety drone teams would be required to no longer exist or operate as they do today.
It's unclear if this bill will receive a vote. In Jefferson City, Joe McLean, WGEM News.